Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!
Hey. The disrespect that you have even talking to me.
Does that feel fake?
You want to act like you're hot.
From being asked if wrestling is fake to steroid accusations and personal attacks, these are the times WWE wrestlers lost their cool and shut down disrespectful interviewers. Starting with the time CM Punk dropped the pipe bomb on an interviewer. Back in December 2014, CM Punk had walked away from professional wrestling and shocked the world by signing with the UFC. He was attempting to reinvent himself as a legit mixed martial artist, and when TSN's Michael Landsberg sat down with Punk for Off the Record, it seemed like a straightforward promotional interview. But what started as a casual discussion about Punk's UFC journey quickly deteriorated into one of the most uncomfortable interviews in history. Landsberg peppered Punk with questions that felt more suited for a comedy roast than a serious interview. He suggested Punk's first UFC opponent should be Drake or Justin Bieber, treating his whole UFC career transition like a joke. But Landsberg's biggest mistake wasn't the jokes. It was his inability to let WWE stay in the past. Despite Punk making it clear he wanted to focus on his UFC future, Landsberg kept circling back to WWE storylines, backstage politics, and wrestling controversies. And then came the moment when Punk finally snapped.
Your demeanor off the camera is 100% different than you want to act like you're hot.
No,
I like your gimmick, kid.
Punk, who had been keeping his composure despite the provocations, called out Landsberg for being two-faced. He accused the journalist of acting friendly and supportive off-camera, only to change his whole demeanor the moment the recording light turned on. Landsberg attempted damage control, but Punk cut through the diplomatic response immediately and told Landsberg that he likes his gimmick. The word choice was deliberate. By calling Landsberg's journalistic persona a gimmick, Punk flipped the entire dynamic. Suddenly, it wasn't the wrestler playing a character. It was the reporter. The interview limped to an awkward conclusion, but Landsberg had already learned exactly why you don't mess with Punk when he has a live mic. But if Punk's takedown of Landsberg was calculated, Randy Orton's response to disrespect was far more direct and physical. Randy Orton has built a Hall of Fame career on his ability to switch from calm and collected to explosively violent in the blink of an eye. It's what made the Viper one of the most dangerous characters in WWE history. But in June 2009, a Mexican TV reporter discovered that Orton's volatile nature wasn't just limited to the ring. Orton was in Mexico City as part of WWE's promotional tour, doing the standard media rounds to hype upcoming shows. The interview started normally, but the reporter seemed determined to get under Orton's skin. He asked silly questions like what Orton ate for breakfast, and Orton's patience was already wearing thin when the reporter made a critical mistake. He used the word fragile to describe Orton and asked why he got injured so often. For a wrestler whose entire brand is built on being a calculated, dangerous athlete, being called fragile is perhaps the worst possible insult. It attacks not just the character, but the person behind it. Someone who had worked through countless injuries and maintained an elite position in the industry for years. Orton's reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. He grabbed the mic from the reporter's hand and got right in his face. Orton dared the reporter to call him fragile to his face and threatened to headbutt his teeth through his skull if he tried to be funny again.
I will headbutt your teeth through your skull!
The incident sparked immediate debate among wrestling fans. Some argued Orton had genuinely lost his temper. Others believed it was a masterful bit of Orton staying in character as the Viper. Whether Orton was truly angry or simply refused to break character, the message was clear. Treat professional wrestlers with respect or face the consequences. But while Orton's confrontation was intense and personal, it paled in comparison to what happened when one of wrestling's most beloved rebels decided to defend the sport in front of the whole world. Roddy Piper spent his entire career breaking rules and speaking uncomfortable truths. As one of wrestling's greatest talkers, he could verbally destroy opponents on the mic before physically outperforming them in the ring. So when comedian Bill Maher decided to mock professional wrestling on his ABC show Politically Incorrect, he had no idea that he was about to get educated by the legend. In 1999, Maher invited Piper, Sting, Bobby Heenan, and Medusa onto his show. But from the moment the segment began, it was clear Maher had no intention of treating his guests or their profession with any semblance of respect.
And they are in on the joke.
Maher opened with a condescending statement that everyone knows wrestling is fake and the audience is in on the joke. Sting attempted to defend the business diplomatically, pointing out that while outcomes were predetermined, the physical toll was absolutely real. But Maher, playing to his audience and his own sense of intellectual superiority, wasn't buying it. He laughed it off and said that there's never a bruise on any of the wrestlers, trying to downplay the physicality of professional wrestling. And that's when Piper decided he'd heard enough. Without warning, Hot Rod stood up from his seat, revealing a metal hip. He then pointed to his wrist and told everyone that it had been broken for 7 years.
Metal hip. Broken wrist.
The studio audience, which had been laughing along with Maher's mockery just moments before, was now cheering for Hot Rod. But this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real pain, real sacrifice, and real consequences being displayed on national TV. However, Piper wasn't finished delivering his message. He was yet to drop the bombshell. He invoked Owen Hart's name and told Maher to go ask Owen's widow Martha if wrestling was fake.
Go tell Mrs. Hart what a joke it is.
Maher had been treating wrestling like a carnival sideshow, but Piper had just reminded everyone that men had died doing this job. Fathers had left behind families, brothers had been buried. This wasn't fake. The finishes might be predetermined, but the wheelchairs, the surgeries, the funerals, those were heartbreakingly real. The host, visibly uncomfortable now, tried to recover with more jokes, but his audience wasn't laughing anymore. Piper had exposed the fundamental cruelty of dismissing something millions of people dedicated their lives to, something that had cost men their health and even their lives. Piper hadn't just defended professional wrestling, he'd educated the entire world about the difference between scripted outcomes and the physical sacrifice wrestlers have to make. He'd transformed a segment designed to mock into a moment of respect. But while Piper's confrontation became legendary, our next incident would take place on foreign soil, where one wrestler's defense of the business almost landed him in prison. In 1997, WWE was expanding its international reach to places like Europe and the Middle East. The Undertaker and Vader were sent to Kuwait as part of the promotional tour for an upcoming WWE event in the region. They appeared on Good Morning Kuwait, a popular talk show for what was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance. Everything proceeded normally until the host asked the forbidden question of if wrestling is real or if wrestlers are just acting. The Undertaker, trying to keep his cool, handled the question diplomatically. He explained that while storylines were predetermined, the physicality was absolutely real. But Vader was in no mood to be diplomatic. Without warning, he flipped the interview table. The host's eyes went wide with shock as Vader lunged forward, grabbed him by his necktie, and pulled the terrified host toward him. Vader asked the host if that felt fake as the cameras captured everything. This wasn't a casual morning talk show anymore. This was a 450-pound former super heavyweight champion attacking a television personality on live television. The aftermath was swift and severe. Kuwaiti authorities detained Vader almost immediately after the incident. He was charged with assault and using obscene language on live TV. Rather than being put in a standard jail cell, Vader was placed under house arrest in a hotel for approximately 10 days while authorities decided what to do with him. Eventually, Vader was fined and allowed to leave the country. But the story had already become global news. Critics pointed out that Vader had massively overreacted to the question, while defenders argued that Vader was simply protecting kayfabe. But while Vader's confrontation happened in the 1990s, our next incident would unfold in the age of social media, where a wrestler's defense of his craft could go viral in minutes. By 2024, professional wrestling had been around for over a century. Every conceivable question had been asked and every cheap joke had been made at wrestlers' expense. You'd think mainstream media would have learned how to treat wrestling with basic professional respect. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. When WWE announced that Elimination Chamber 2024 would take place in Perth, Australia, it represented a major moment for the company's international expansion. Grayson Waller and Knight appeared on one of Australia's most popular morning shows for what seemed like a simple promotional interview. But then, the hosts made a mistake. Barr suggested that Waller and Knight demonstrate some of their wrestling moves, treating it like a fun morning show bit instead of a legit sports. But Waller wasn't smiling anymore. Before he could fully articulate why this was problematic, the floor manager approached Waller and began shadowboxing as if this were all some kind of joke. Waller's expression hardened, and he declared that if he came over there and punched him in the jaw, they'd have to call the police. The hosts quickly tried to move on, clearly realizing the interview had gone completely off the rails. But the damage was done, and more importantly, the cameras had captured everything. The clip exploded across social media, and the wrestling community rallied behind Waller almost unanimously. Waller later addressed the incident in follow-up interviews, stating that he hates when people disrespect wrestling and treat it as a joke. But while Waller had control over his temper, the same can't be said about Vince McMahon. If you're going to pick a fight with Vince McMahon, you'd better come prepared. Bob Costas learned this lesson the hard way when he sat down with the WWE chairman for a 2001 interview on HBO's On the Record. The interview took place during one of the most turbulent periods in McMahon's career. His football league, the XFL, had just collapsed spectacularly after a single season. The league, which was supposed to revolutionize professional football with WWE-style entertainment, had become a national joke. Ratings had plummeted, television partners had bailed, and McMahon had lost an estimated $35 million on the venture. Costas smelled blood in the water and decided to poke the bear. He opened the interview by hammering McMahon about the XFL's failure, asking pointed questions designed to make the WWE chairman squirm. But Vince didn't get to where he was by dodging confrontation. He'd faced worse criticism than a sports journalist's disapproval and handled the questions while keeping his composure. But then Costas escalated. He began attacking the WWF itself, criticizing its violent content. He brought up the company's depiction of women, the edgy gestures made by factions like DX that had become signatures during the Attitude Era, and the fact that children were attending these shows. McMahon defended his product, arguing that it reflected contemporary culture and gave audiences what they wanted. But Costas wasn't interested in McMahon's justifications. He kept interrupting, talking over McMahon, refusing to let him complete a thought. And that's when Vince's legendary temper began to show. Vince pointed at Costas and asked him if he was going to ever let him finish or if he was going to continue interrupting him every time. The power dynamic in the room shifted immediately. Costas, who stood maybe 5 feet 7 inches and weighed around 140 pounds, was suddenly face-to-face with a 230-pound maniac who looked genuinely ready to turn the interview into a physical confrontation. Years later, McMahon admitted he was close to punching Costas during the interview, but told himself to keep his cool. The confrontation showed that McMahon viewed attacks on WWE as personal attacks on himself. The company wasn't just his business, it was his identity, his legacy, his life's work. When someone like Costas dismissed it as cheap and low quality, they weren't just criticizing a television show. They were dismissing the empire Vince McMahon had built. And if you want to relive the prime years of WWE in their entirety, check out this video next.